I will. I'll be at the Americans for Prosperity Tennessee Summit, and you can be there as well if you go to afptnsummit.org. And our next guest will be there. Robby Starbuck will be standing alongside and offering his thoughts on getting America back on track. And he joins us on the Murphy Show hotline to talk about last night's debate and amongst other things. Hey, Robby, how are you?
Oh, I'm just real nice and cool over the past few days. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Robby, I can't wait to see you next week, by the way. I'd be remiss if I didn't remember this, but you'll be at the event, Americans for Prosperity event. So I'm looking forward to actually shaking your hand and meeting you in person.
It's going to be a great event. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for people. If you haven't gone to one of these events before, this is a good one to go to because there's going to be so many different people to hear from that really have a great effect on our daily lives, and I think that if you ever wanted that opportunity to sort of catch the ear of one of those people, it's a good place to do it.
Robby, tell me about your experience last night. Did you watch any of the debate live? Did you choose to watch Tucker v. Trump? How did you do it?
So I actually skipped both altogether last night. I did watch both of them today. So last night, me and my wife took our son to a concert. It was awesome. He loves that stuff. But I did watch the Trump-Tucker one first, which is now at over 200 million views. And then I watched the debate after. And the debate was underwhelming, in comparison to the other. But when you look at those numbers, that's what's really staggering. Over 200 million people watched it just on Tucker's Twitter feed, okay? Or X feed. I guess they call it X now. That's incredible.
No, it is, and it goes to the power of not only Tucker Carlson, but obviously the power of the 45th president of the United States. Initially I was a little mildly critical of Donald Trump for not going to the debate. I feel like at some point he ought to stand before the American people with the others on stage. But after watching the debate last night, I have to say Trump was right. I mean, it was like the kids' table at Thanksgiving dinner, and Trump is sitting over at the adult table waiting for the kids to figure out who's man or woman enough to take him on in the Republican primary. I think it was a smart move on his part to sit this one out.
I agree. The reality is there's a bunch of people on that stage who shouldn't be there. There's the Doug Burnham guy who literally had to pay people to donate to him. He gave them $20 gift cards in exchange for $1 so he could meet the threshold of donations to get on that stage. There's people like Chris Christie who's literally just doing a campaign to bash Trump. Why would you go on stage with him? No matter how you feel about Trump, he's got a massive lead in the primary. What is the net positive of going up there? However, I agree with you. He does need to debate at some point. Not just because it's an important American ideal, I think. People need to hear from the eventual, sort of final two, final three. But I think that beyond that, he's just good at debates. So it would be good to go up there, especially because, one of the things that's going to be talked about by detractors, they're going to say he's getting older. We'll go up there on a debate stage and show them how sharp you are. I think that's one of the great ways to do it. But you can't argue with the decision last night. I mean, he took over 200 million viewers instead of going on a debate stage where he would have just had food thrown at him from the kids' table, because the whole thing would have just been the why I hate Trump, therapy session if Trump was there.
Was there a potential VP candidate? I look at the polls, and it would take something extraordinary, in my opinion, to not have Donald Trump as our eventual Republican nominee. In your mind, Robby, was there a potential VP selection on stage last night, or were they somewhere else?
Potentially, however, if I had to put money down today, I would say it's going to be somebody who was not on that stage last night. I like Vivek obviously stole the show, but, I'm worried about a guy who went along with the masks, went along with the vaccine at first, and now, is speaking out against those things. But he went along with everything at first, and, that gives me pause. But beyond that, he has no political history. You don't need to have been in office. I actually prefer an outsider who hasn't been in office. However, you should have some sort of track record to run on. Vivek doesn't have one at all. In fact, he didn't even vote in a presidential election until the last one. Okay, so if you haven't voted in presidential elections in your lifetime, have no real track record for people to go off of, it's just really hard for me to believe that in the last 2 years you had a sudden awakening where you became this incredible candidate with great positions. Now, is it possible? Sure. I just don't think that your first step after that great massive change in your life would be to run for president. I think that would be kind of, grandiose thinking and maybe a little narcissistic. But, I like, if you just went by what he said, it's impressive. He says impressive, great things. But I just don't know that I buy the whole thing, and maybe that'll change over time and he'll prove to people that there's a reason to believe it. But I'd say if anybody, sort of had kind of put themselves out there in that position, maybe him. DeSantis obviously has been the best governor in the country. So I don't think there's a debate about that. If you were just going for just chops on policy and somebody to get things done, I would say he'd be a great VP. However, there's the Florida thing where they both live in Florida, and that's a problem in a presidential election. So I don't know that that's going to happen. And I think that there's a lot of let's say, no love lost between the two camps. I think that's going to happen.
You're right. Vivek was the central figure of attacks. Chris Christie attacked him. Mike Pence attacked him. Nikki Haley took her turn attacking him. And I thought he responded to those attacks very well. But I thought because he was the central figure of attack, that boded well for both himself. It gave his profile a boost, and it went well for Ron DeSantis. I mean, for him to stand there kind of above the fray, comment when he was called on, but kind of stay out of all of that. I felt like those two came out fairly good. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say if you had to pick two winners, I would say that. The one thing that I was frankly surprised by, because Ron is a very smart guy, was there was a moment when they were all asked, would you stand with Trump still if he won the primary and then was incarcerated by, let's say, this crazy DA down in Georgia or whatever it may be. And they said, raise your hand if you are. And if you watch that clip again, you'll notice that, Vivek puts up his hand very quickly, and DeSantis turns and looks around at what everybody's doing before he raises his hand. Even if he didn't mean that in any sort of special way and it was just a reflex, it makes it look like you're looking to other people's leadership to make a decision instead of being a leader. That would worry me as a voter. If I said, Trump doesn't exist, that would be the thing that would worry me. But I do, again, love everything he's done in Florida. So I think there's a great track record with DeSantis.
I love the idea of Vivek as the political outsider. You are somewhat the ultimate political outsider, none of which is of your own doing, Robby. I just want to ask you a personal question because we haven't had a chance to talk about this since it happened. But, you've gone round and round with the Tennessee GOP, and now they're passing new bylaws. I call these the Robby Starbuck bylaws with regard to who is and is not eligible. Any public thoughts on the latest round between yourself and the Tennessee GOP?
Yeah, I mean, they haven't voted and finalized this yet, but for those who don't know what you're talking about, it's this idea that, I would not be allowed to run for 10 years. This is not the entire Tennessee GOP. There's plenty of, great people in Tennessee GOP who don't agree with this. It's up in the air in terms of whether this will happen or not. I guess we'll find out as this, gets closer with the vote. I will say this. If you care, and even if you don't like me, but you just think the idea of banning somebody from running for office for 10 years is a bad thing, just tell your SEC member it's something you don't agree with, and, tell them that it's important in our system, even if you don't agree with a certain candidate, that people have a choice. And that's kind of what I've always said, is just give people a choice. And I'll never understand the idea of anybody not wanting to give people a choice. I think that's like the very core Central American idea. But, I know some people have gone and they've done polls and stuff, and there's people who are worried that if I ran for office that, I would win. And, I'm not even thinking about running for office, so I can tell you right now, I mean, this would be sort of news because people have asked me a lot. I'm not planning on running for Congress, not planning on running for anything right now. I'm very busy with projects I'm doing. I'll always be involved, because I've got priorities of our own. One of them coming up here is in the next session, not the special, but the next one. I would like to pass a bill that will pass a death penalty for pedophiles, child rapists specifically. So, there's always going to be priority issues that I'll go and I'll fight for.
Well, I wanted to ask you about it because I do believe that it's an affront to the concept of the representative republic that you would be precluded from being a part of the process because a select few have been butthurt about how things went over the past several years. But be that as it may, it's good to talk with you. It's good to get your thoughts on the debate last night, and I look forward to seeing you next week, Robby.
You too. See you there, and I hope to see people who are listening today.
Absolutely. Take care. There's a Robby Starbuck. He'll be at the American for Prosperity event, that summit coming up. Why do I always forget? It's the Maxwell Millennium House or the Millennium Maxwell House? I can't get it straight.